Hi, I'm Kat Kalashian, and this is the Live and Invest Overseas podcast. I am the senior Europe editor for Live and Invest Overseas, and I am based here in Paris, where I've been living for 4 years. I also lived here for another 4 years when I was younger, and I live here without a car. I prefer living without a car. It's a much healthier way to live. Obviously, I prefer going wherever I can by foot or by bike. Public transportation is the last resort, and this is honestly one of the top things that I consider when I think about somewhere that I'd like to live. So in the US, the only place that I really felt happy was in Manhattan, where I didn't need to own a car. I really hated when I owned a car in the US, and also when I owned a car in Panama, which was where I lived before coming to Europe. And going without a car has actually reduced my cost of living by 20 to 30%, depending on the calculation. My husband and I argue over this, but it will put a huge dent in your budget. So you can really save a lot of money by living overseas and going carless. It's possible to live overseas without a car for many reasons. Some of them, including the fact that many countries other than America are much more condensed. America is very sprawling and spread out, whereas many other countries don't take nearly as long to traverse. So it's easier to get around without a car. Many other countries and or cities have much more advanced public transportation systems, and the cities are small enough that you can just walk around them. Whenever I go back to the US, I'm originally from the East Coast, and my husband's family or my family are always a little shocked by the fact that we don't own a car. Even though we've had this conversation many times over the years, they still can't believe that I could possibly live without a car, and they have a million questions about how we are able to live our lives without a car. And honestly, though, it's not a sacrifice. I prefer not having a car. I prefer not spending all that money on a car, and it's much healthier. We have a smaller carbon footprint, and this is true not just of us specifically, but would be true of most retirees. Some 70% of Americans over 50 living in suburban areas don't have any access to public transportation, and transportation has thus become their second biggest expense. So for any American over 65, you fit into this category. Transportation is very likely your second largest expense in life, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. That's right after housing and right before healthcare. So it goes to show you just what a giant cost this is and how much of a chunk of your budget that could be if you took it out. Of course, gas prices have only been going up for the past year, and it's getting more dire. In fact, this past year, according to the Consumer Price Index, gas rose faster than it ever has in the entire history of the index, which dates back to 1935. So this isn't slowing down. Cars are not going to get any cheaper. In fact, many cities around the world are actively looking to ban cars and go vehicle free. Paris is one of these cities, hoping to be vehicle free by 2024. And so aside from cutting out the expense and cutting out the carbon footprint, it's also one of the biggest ways that retirees say that they've lost weight overseas. Once they move overseas, they say they ditch their car and they end up walking a lot more. And without even trying to, also they're eating a healthier diet in many cases. Without even trying, without dieting, without exercising on purpose, they end up losing 10 to 30 pounds. I've heard the story many a time. Plus, cars are dangerous, right? They're probably one of the leading causes of death in the world. When you factor in fact, this is actually a true, not rhetorical statistic. When you factor in deaths due to vehicle accidents, rural and suburban areas in the US have death rates on par with cities with high homicide rates. So, wherever you are in suburbia could have a death rate on par with Manhattan, or, think of whatever most dangerous city in the world or city in the US that you can think of, and they likely have similar death rates. It's just that people are dying on the roads instead of in the streets. Aside from all of these benefits, as I say, it is just good for your body. It's a great change of mentality. And so while there are some cities that are much better and much worse at this, generally speaking, Europe is going to be the best place in the world for going carless. Asia also has some great public transportation systems in their big cities. However, there is also that added language barrier that you'd have to deal with, and they can also be so large and developed that they are overwhelming and a little bit hard to navigate. So we'll talk a little bit about all of this. Latin America it's coming up. It's not as developed in this part of public services as Europe is, for example, or Asia is in some cases. But there are some places in Latin America that do offer the potential to go without a car. So number one, I'll start with Paris, France. I'll start with Europe because it is the easiest in Europe. So top places in Europe that you can live without owning a car. My number one pick is Paris, France. I live here. I can attest 1000%. You do not need a car. A car would be an expensive liability. It would be a hassle. It would be a headache, and it would cost a lot of money to keep a car here. Paris is one of the best public transportation systems in the world. We've got a bus. We've got many buses. We've got many metros, and usually you can get from any point A to any point B in about 30 minutes. The RER system will take you a little bit. It'll take you within the city as well, very quickly, but really it's designed to take you outside of the city. And so even within, say, an hour on the RER, you could be well outside of Paris in a forest, visiting chateau or, in some other fantastic location. And the RER tickets, the public transport tickets are $180 each, but the RER tickets are a little bit more depending on how far you travel. The metro is also said to be one of the safest in the world. And the TGV, which are the high-speed trains, will take you just about anywhere in Europe. I have been all over Europe in the past 8 months. I've been to about 8 different countries, and I've only flown to a few of them. The rail lines are a great way to get around in Europe. Plus, what I love most about Paris is how small, compact, and flat it is. So you can walk from end to end in just a couple of hours. It's really the best way to see the city. It's the best way to get around, to live your life here. And our mayor, Anne Hidalgo, who's actually been in power, she's been the mayor of our city since 2014. She has made a priority of reducing cars and expanding bike lanes, and is responsible for this proposition of Paris going car-free by 2024, when we will host the Olympics. In preparation for all of that, roads have already been, half sacrificed to bikes. Half of the lanes have been taken over from cars and given over to bikes. Pedestrianized zones are ever increasing. And we're seeing it on a day-to-day basis that the pedestrians, that is, and the bike riders are taking over the city, which is a great thing to see. We also have a public bike sharing system called Velib. You'll never have to walk more than a few blocks to any station. It's very cheap as well. You can just pay as you go, or you can get a subscription. And it really is, I would say, one of I think, hands down, the best city in the world to go carless in. Number 2 on our Europe list of where to go carless is Lisbon, Portugal. But so I'm going to start with the downsides because I've made such a big deal out of Paris being number 1. The big downside of Lisbon is that if you do go carless, it is a very hilly city. And I am not just talking a few gentle slopes or, confined to one part of the city. The entire city is extremely vertiginous. You're up and down constantly. So if you are not able to walk, if you don't, have the mobility that you once did, or for whatever reason, you don't want to have hills in your life, Lisbon isn't necessarily the best choice to prioritize by foot. However, there is a fantastic network of trams, metros, funiculars, ferries, and buses to get you over, under, and around every hump. The metro has 4 lines and is generally the fastest method to get around, but with 172 routes, the bus is actually the most practical method most of the time and gets you exactly where you need to go. In Spain, we have Barcelona and Madrid. Barcelona, I like for the same reasons I like Paris. It is fairly compact, and it is great for walking and biking. There are very few hills. The 2 hills that it does have are kind of confined to the outskirts of both sides of the city. There are 230 bus lines and 12 metro lines that crisscross the city, make it ideal for going carless. And there are even night buses here and funiculars that go up to the 2 big hills. Madrid is a large city, so gets down marks from from my perspective from that aspect, but. And it is also somewhat hilly, but it has the hands down most accessible system in the world. It has the best network coverage in the world. You have to walk the least far to find the nearest outlet for public transportation, essentially. You'll never have to walk more than a couple of minutes. And it is also one of the most handicapped accessible in the world, with over 60% of its metro stations accessible. Prague, Czechia, is possibly a surprise, but metros, trams, buses, funiculars, and trains all service the people of Prague. And those under 14 and over 65 all travel for free, which is fantastic. And it's kind of fun because some of the trams actually date back to the 1920s. So also a historic way to ride, a little bit of a tourist thing to do while you're there. Plus, the city is small and flat. Again, it gets top marks for me in this perspective. You get to walk from end to end very easily, bike from end to end very easily. And it doesn't have its own bike share system, but there are 2 private companies that work here, each with 1,000 bikes, which is plenty for the population and the area that they have to crisscross. In Italy, I've also chosen 2 locations, Milan and Rome. So first of all, don't drive in Italy. It is terrifying and also very difficult in cities because there lots of restrictions to keep vehicles out and to keep vehicles confined to certain parts of the day. So it can be very, very difficult to drive in for Florence, for example, in Rome. Venice is impossible. It's not allowed. And so public transportation is one of the best ways to get around some of Italy's big cities where you really can't get by in a car. And I really don't recommend it, even if you do want to try. And so Milan has the country's most extensive metro system. And all of its stations are handicap accessible. So you can get around anywhere. Milan, I would say possibly third after Paris and Barcelona for me. I would say Milan is a great option for going carless. It is also a compact city, and you can get around most really you can cross the city by foot, but within neighborhoods, you really never need to do anything other than walk around. You've got the bikes. In fact, the bike share system in Milan was the first where I've ever seen that they had child seats on the back of the buses, which again, I've never seen anywhere else, or on the back of the bikes, excuse me. Again, I've never seen that anywhere else in the world. So very cool thing, very adaptable system there. And it's just an easy system to navigate. You'll just have no trouble getting around. Rome is also compact, but this is where it gets really big markdowns in my book, is that it's almost entirely cobbles, and the cobbles can be really challenging, whether you're walking or biking. If you're walking around all day, even just as a tourist, you're going to notice that when you get to your bed at night. The metro network is small, but the trams, trains, and buses are helpful to get around all of the rest of the city. I would be remiss if I didn't mention Amsterdam, Netherlands, because it is famous for having, possibly the world's most famous ever bike sharing system long before it became trendy all over the world. It's ideal for walkers and bikers. It is a flat city other than all the little bridges that you have to go over. But very few people in Amsterdam own cars. It is, again, another top choice, I would say. The downside to Amsterdam going carless is the fact that the weather is a little bit cooler for much of the year. So while I wouldn't say Paris is a warm city year round, we do get a full-on winter here. Amsterdam is much colder, much longer throughout the year. So, and rainier as well, much wetter climate. So when you do have to use your own 2 feet or get around to the public transport systems, you have to factor in the weather there. And again, that's another reason that biking might not be viable all year long. Berlin is famous for the U and S-Bahns. These are the above and underground rail systems. They are historic and they serve the city very well, as they always have. The city is also improving its system and expects by 2023 to have many new cars in the circuit and new lines added to the U-Bahn beginning in 2030. So big additions on the horizon for Berlin. Great city for going carless, and always going to be a priority for that city that's already prioritizing their maintenance and their expansion. Zurich is one of the least affordable cities in Europe, frankly, definitely on this list. So Zurich, Switzerland does not get top marks, although it is absolutely a city where you could go carless. It's also so tiny that you really could walk from end to end in about 20 minutes. So using the public transportation system isn't necessarily, required by any means. And it's very expensive. So a little bit, a couple of downsides there. Plus it's cold, it's Switzerland. So for most of the year, you're not going to want to wait outside for a tram. So while you could go carless here, it's definitely not my top choice for going carless. London, England, in fact, does boast the world's most expensive public transport system. And London is also a very expensive city. So as is Zurich, they are both very expensive cities with very expensive transport systems. And so in London, though, it really is a completely viable way to get around. I would say many people in London also don't own cars or would hope to not own cars. And it's possible because of the underground system that's so fantastic, as well as the buses. And of course, London is a sprawling, massive city. Again, it doesn't get top marks in my book because although the weather isn't so bad, it's pretty temperate. It does get rainy, of course, but you're not going to freeze while you're waiting in a tunnel for the train. But what is annoying is the fact that it is so expensive to use and that you really have no choice but to use it because London is so massive. That you really can't walk. You can walk, within your little neighborhood, within your few block radius, but you can't walk from one site to another site in London. Another one that is really just kind of an honorable mention on this trip is Stockholm, Sweden. And the reason that I really wanted to mention it was because its metro has also been known as the world's longest art gallery because so many of its stations are beautifully decorated. But again, Stockholm mainly runs on trams, and in this weather, you're not going to be walking, biking, or waiting for a tram outside for most of the year. So while you could go carless, great option to go carless in the summertime. Being realistic, it's not a year-round option. So there you have it, our top picks for where to live in the world without a car. I hope this is helpful. And where do you live without a car? Where are you considering living without a car? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe. You'll see a new video every Saturday.